Imagine standing before a vast cave, its mouth dark and silent, as if whispering something ancient and profound. Everyone walks past it, but no one steps inside, because within it lie the forgotten parts of your soul, the anger you never dared to admit, the sorrow you've always avoided, the power you were afraid of every time it surfaced. Carl Jung once said one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You don't need to be fixed. You just need to be seen wholly, even the messy, angry, fragile, or wild parts of you. And that is the beginning of shadow work, the journey into the darkness within. Not to become someone else, but to finally become yourself. Did you know the shadow isn't where you are weak? It's where you were left behind. Inside that shadow is the cry of your inner child, the one who was hurt and told to stay silent. It holds your creativity, your sensitivity, the sacred rage that rises when your boundaries are crossed. It holds the parts you once hid because no one could love me if I was like that. But what you're searching for, your strength, your freedom, your truth, doesn't lie in the light. It lies in your ability to stand in the dark and no longer tremble. When you turn inward, when you face the fear, the pain, the pieces of you long buried, something extraordinary happens. You don't just heal, you begin to remember who you truly are. So here's the question. What part of yourself have you left behind in that cave? And are you ready to go in and bring it back? If this resonates with you, drop a comment. Which part of your shadow is longing to be heard? And don't forget to subscribe, because the journey back to yourself is only just beginning. When we were children, no one taught us how to be strong in the Jungian sense, strong through truth, through feeling, through connection to the deeper self. Instead, we learned one key rule of survival: be good. Don't cry too much. People don't like needy kids. Don't get angry, that's impolite. Don't speak your mind or you'll be called disrespectful. Very early on, we gave up our raw wildness in exchange for a more acceptable version of ourselves, and we started to perform a performance that often lasts a lifetime. We no longer lived like a free-flowing river, but like a mirror that reflects expectations, that reflects the desires of our parents, teachers, lovers, bosses, society, but no longer reflects ourselves. And so the mask begins to form. Carl Jung called it the persona, the social mask. We wear the version of the self we craft to survive the outer world. The persona is not bad. In fact, it's a necessary tool of adaptation. Without it, you couldn't work, socialize, or function in society. But the problem is, many people forget that they're wearing a mask. When a mask is worn for too long, it's no longer a mask. You start to believe it's you. And what happens when you lose touch with your true self? You start to feel exhausted but don't know why. You feel empty even though life seems full. You can't sleep, you lose interest. You feel lost and you can't explain it. You've lived in the persona for so long, you can no longer tell the difference between who you are and who you've been programmed to be. A psychoanalytic example, the story of a successful entrepreneur. Let me tell you about David, a CEO I met at a personal growth retreat in California. David had everything society calls success: a multi-million-dollar company, a picture-perfect family, a luxurious, healthy lifestyle. But in our private session, I noticed David never looked me in the eyes for more than 3 seconds. His voice was flat whenever he talked about his achievements. I asked him, "When was the last time you were truly angry?" David went silent for a long time. Then he said, "I don't get angry. I just feel tired." David didn't realize his fatigue wasn't from work. It was from living far from his true self. He had learned anger, loss of control, so he buried it for years. But the cost of that suppression was he couldn't set clear boundaries with his team. He was easily manipulated because he always wanted to be the nice guy. He no longer knew what truly made him happy, only what he should do, not what he wanted to do. This is a textbook case of a strong persona, but a weakened soul. So what is true weakness? In Jung's view, weakness isn't when you cry or feel hurt. In fact, he believed true weakness is when you live cut off from your authentic self. Talking to him, when you say I'm fine while your heart is breaking, that's weakness. When you say no to a dream because you're afraid of judgment, that's weakness. When you apologize for speaking your truth, that's weakness. When you abandon your desires out of fear of failure, that's weakness. You are not weak because you feel too much. You are weak because you don't stand up for your own feelings. A psychological metaphor: the shadow and the illusion of light. Imagine your soul as a house with 100 rooms. But since childhood, you've only been allowed to live in one, the clean, bright, reasonable one. What about the others? They were locked up, labeled bad, shameful, not okay. Inside those rooms live your anger, your fears, your sexuality, your hunger for power, your silenced desires. Carl Jung called this rejected part the shadow. And true strength does not lie in the light. It lies in your willingness to walk into those dark rooms and say, I see you, and I'm not afraid of you anymore. A painful truth, this society is built to keep you weak. Be honest. How many times were you praised for being well-behaved when you gave up your truth? How many times were you called rebellious just for saying no? How many times did you swallow your rage to keep the peace and ended up drained? Social media tells you to be humble, which often means don't shine too bright. Family teaches you to be nice, meaning don't make anyone uncomfortable. Culture tells you to be kind, meaning keep everyone happy except yourself. Jung would ask, kind by whose standards, weak by whose definition? A woman who chooses independence is called cold. A man who sets boundaries is called arrogant. These labels aren't truth. They're psychological tools of control. How much longer can you live without being honest with yourself? Dear viewer, maybe you're tired, but not because of work. Maybe you're tired because you're living a life that isn't yours. Maybe you're lost in 100 roles and you no longer know who you are. Only who you think you have to be loved, to be safe. Let me remind you of this. Your weakness is not your fear, not your tears, not your sensitivity. Your real weakness, if any, is your refusal to stand with your own feelings. Have you ever stared into the mirror at your familiar smile, your own eyes, and suddenly felt like you were looking at a stranger? It's not that you don't know who you are. It's that you only see the parts that are allowed to be seen. You see the well-timed smile, the properly adjusted gaze, the tone of voice soft enough not to make anyone uncomfortable. But what about the other parts? The thoughts you were once told were wrong, the emotions labeled as too much, the deep desires you never dared to express because they didn't fit the mold. They didn't disappear. They didn't dissolve into thin air. They were buried right beneath the mask you've come to call me. Persona, the mask we wear to survive the outer world. Carl Jung called that outer layer the persona, from Latin meaning mask, as worn in classical theater. And he was clear the persona isn't inherently bad. In fact, it's a vital tool for functioning in society. It helps you work with colleagues. It helps you hold back emotions in professional settings. It helps you save face in public. So the issue isn't that you wear a mask. The issue begins when you forget that you're wearing it. Many of us live our entire lives as persona. We build relationships through the persona. We choose careers, marry, even raise children in the way our persona allows. And slowly we forget what our real self even looked like. Persona and shadow, two sides of the same being. In Jungian psychoanalysis, the relationship is clear. The persona is the part you show, the image you construct to be accepted. The shadow is the part you hide, the thoughts, emotions, and desires you don't dare reveal. The more you try to appear perfect, polite, and proper, the more your shadow gets suppressed and distorted. And at some point, the shadow will no longer stay silent. It begins to speak through depression, anxiety, existential crises, or self-sabotaging behaviors you don't even understand. Real-life case. The story of the too nice woman. Let me tell you about Elaine, a woman I once worked with in therapy. Elaine was the kind of person society loves. Polite, gentle, always putting others first. Never raised her voice, never said no. But every time she entered the therapy room, she felt a vague exhaustion. She would cry over things that seemed minor. Not because she was weak, but because she had become too good at pretending to be strong. In one session, I asked her, "When was the last time you were truly angry?" Elaine went silent for a long time. Then tears streamed down her face. She said, "I'm not allowed to be angry. If I'm angry, people will think I'm selfish, that I'm a bad person." Elaine didn't have a problem with others. She had a problem with herself, with the part of her shadow that had been locked away for too long. And the price of that repression was this. Elaine traded authenticity for conditional love. Yes, the persona helps you interact, work, climb the ladder. But when you return home, when you're lying in the dark alone, if all you feel is a nameless emptiness, a deep sigh from nowhere, that isn't just exhaustion. That's your shadow screaming. You're not tired because you've worked too much. You're tired because you've been pretending to be someone you no longer connect with. Signs you've been merged with your persona too long. You don't know what you want, only what you should do. You avoid all conflict even if it means betraying your own feelings. You feel uncomfortable seeing others be authentic because deep down you envy their freedom. You often dream of rebelling, walking away, yelling, but wake up only to keep smiling and enduring. The danger is not the shadow, it's in not facing it. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You think you're choosing freely, but you're really running away. You believe you're kind, but you're living like a hostage in the prison of socially engineered fragility. The shadow is not what should scare you. What should scare you is living your whole life never truly being alive. Where to start small acts of taking the mask off? Write down 3 things you've always wanted to say, but never had the courage to voice. Think of someone who irritates you and ask what part of them reflects something I don't allow myself to be. Notice the moments you say yes when you mean no. That's your persona running the show. These small steps will help you witness how the mask operates and little by little reclaim space for your authentic self. Redefining strength. Strength is not the suppression of emotion. Strength is the courage to face emotion without judgment. Strength is not about being perfect. Strength is about being real even when you're not okay. Today you may be the light. Tomorrow you may be the darkness. That's okay. Only when both are acknowledged integrated do you become whole. There's a great paradox that very few people notice. What makes us most fragile isn't emotion itself, it's the language we use to name those emotions. You're not living in the world as it is. You're living in the world as you call it. And the language you use every day, from unconscious phrases to deeply ingrained speech patterns, is silently rewriting your entire experience of life. We often think of language as a tool for communication. But in truth, language is a mirror of the mind, a doorway into the unconscious. And if you don't know what you're saying, chances are you don't really know how you're living either. Logos, the creative power of the word. In ancient Greek philosophy, logos wasn't just about words. It was both reason and creative order, a principle that brings harmony out of chaos. In the Bible, logos appears as the first act of creation, let there be light, and light came into existence. Carl Jung wasn't far from this concept. In analytical psychology, he saw language as a sacred ritual, the meeting point between mind and soul. But Jung also warned, not all words have the power to heal. Only when they are truthful, undistorted by the persona, can they open the doors to the unconscious. I don't know. A gentle lie to avoid the truth. Have you ever heard yourself say, I don't know, maybe I'm just tired. It's probably just me. It's fine, really. It's nothing. But the truth is, you do know. You know you're disappointed. You know you're hurt. You know you're angry or abandoned. You just don't name it because to speak it is to face it. And to face it means to take responsibility. So instead, you choose vague language to delay the inner confrontation. But you can't heal a wound if you can't name it. Language is the shape of the inner world. Jung once wrote, he who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens. But to look inside, you need language. Language is the flashlight in the cave of the soul. A sorrow left unnamed becomes depression. An anger unacknowledged turns into self-sabotage or passive aggression. A dream left uninterpreted becomes an ever-present anxiety. Every word you choose is a key. It can open doors, or it can lock you in. Try this. Write down a sentence you often say to yourself like, I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. Everyone leaves eventually. Now rewrite it in the voice of your mature self from the perspective of Logos. I feel not enough, but that feeling isn't the truth. I'm learning to do better, and mistakes don't define me. People leaving doesn't mean I'm unworthy. It means we're no longer aligned. Repeat this every day for 7 days. You'll start to hear a new voice inside, not the inner critic, but the voice of your becoming. When you change your language, you rewrite your fate. Language is psychic energy. A clear affirmation can create a boundary. A firm no can free you from a toxic relationship. A truthful sentence, even if trembling, can open a real connection. You don't need to speak your truth to the whole world, but start by speaking it to yourself. A true story, the man who never said no. Mark, a client of mine, was a gentle, devoted man in his 50s. For 20 years, he was the good guy in every sense. Always said yes. Always worked overtime. Always took care of others. But not once in his life had he said no for himself. And then Mark collapsed. Not just physical exhaustion, but emotional breakdown. He didn't know who he was, only the role he'd been playing for others. We began his healing journey with something simple, learning to say no. No to what drained him, no to false guilt, no to being nice at all costs. The first time he ever said no was when his wife asked him to skip therapy for a social event. He looked her in the eyes and said, "I need this. I'm sorry, but I can't." She wasn't angry, she was silent. Then she cried. And for the first time in years, they spoke honestly. One word no freed a marriage from performance and opened a door to real connection. Language is a spiritual ritual. In ancient cultures, speech was always sacred, a vow, a curse, a blessing. Today, you say thousands of words a day, unaware that you're programming your subconscious with each sentence. Iruam, when you say I'm a failure, you engrave an identity into your psyche. When you say I'll never forgive, you lock yourself in the past. When you say I'm learning, you open the path of growth. Language isn't just something you use, it's something you become. Are you ready to rewrite your story? If there's a phrase you keep repeating and you know it no longer serves your evolution, share it in the comments. Start with a new sentence, "I'm learning to," and let the rest unfold. I'll read every word you write. And if you're ready, we can rewrite the story together with a deeper, clearer, more awakening language, one that rises from your true self. Have you ever experienced a moment when your heart seemed to stop beating, when every cell trembled in the face of pain, fear, or even a dream so big it felt uncontrollable? That is the affect complex, intense emotional layers, unprocessed or unconscious, lying deep within you. Carl Jung called these complexes emotions like wildfire, passionate, radiant, but potentially explosive, if not held and guided by the conscious ego. Conscious ego versus affect complex, the dance of power. The affect complex is like a raw gem, vibrant, dazzling, but dangerous if left unrefined. The conscious ego is the jeweler, gently shaping, refining, allowing the gem to shine with meaning and purpose in your life. If the ego is too weak, not present, or aware enough, the gem may shatter, leading to outbursts, panic, depression, or self-destructive behavior. On the other hand, if the ego tries to over-control, the gem never shines, becoming a suppressed emotion, silenced and stuck. And this is the path of individuation Jung proposed. You must not only distinguish what is me ego and what is emotion complex, but hold the tension between them so a new energy can emerge. Not by repressing emotions, nor by letting them run wild, but by consciously engaging with them. Holding the tension of the opposites. Imagine stretching a rope between two massive stones. One symbolizes reason, the other emotion. If you let go, the rope falls into the abyss of unconsciousness and you lose connection. But if you pull too hard toward logic, the rope may snap and emotion gets buried. To hold that rope taut is a psychological miracle. You allow emotions to surface, but don't let them take over. You give them a voice while the ego stays present as a guide, analyzing, regulating, and keeping balance. It's in that in-between space that you find your true home, where thought and feeling meet in creative, soulful living. A real example, the artist between emotion and control. I once worked with Clara, a painter sensitive and gifted, but paralyzed in front of the blank canvas. She said, "Emotions come flooding in, but I don't know what to do with them. They're too much. I'm scared if I let them out, I'll lose control." Clara was caught between a powerful affect complex and an overly controlling ego. She didn't want to drown in emotion, but she also didn't want to stiffen her expression. The lesson: strong emotion plus conscious ego stir deep creativity. When Clara learned how to tune into the waves of feeling, to let them pass through her without forcing control, each painting began to breathe. Her art had soul depth and a quiet precision she'd always longed for. How to hold the tension without snapping. Breathe deeply when strong emotions arise. Pause. Slow down your breath. Acknowledge this is anger, fear, my emotion. Ask gentle questions within. Why am I feeling this way? What is this emotion trying to tell me? Speak or write it out. Be real with your feelings as you would with a close friend. No judgment, no forcing. Create feedback loops. Always allow space between emotion and action. That's how you hold the tension. Jungian symbol, wings and claws. Picture an eagle. The claws are emotion, fierce, primal, instinctual. The wings are ego, lifting the eagle high, keeping direction. If the claws are unused, emotions fester and become toxic. If the wings are weak, you're dragged down by the very feelings meant to give you life. You need both the claws to dare to live authentically, wings to rise without losing yourself. Everyday applications, big decisions. When you feel anxious or afraid, don't dismiss it. Say, I feel fear. Use ego to analyze. Why am I afraid? What risks are real? What can I control? When you feel hurt, don't go silent. Say, I feel angry because my boundaries were crossed. When you want to say no, don't rush to comply. Ask, am I afraid of losing this connection? Then hold the tension between fear of rejection and self-respect. If you've ever faced the dark shadows within yourself, slowly peeled off the persona, the social mask you built to survive, rewritten your inner narrative using the language of self-awareness, and learned how to balance emotion with reason, then congratulations, you're standing at the threshold of a decisive step shaping your true self. Not in someone else's image, not by society's standards, but as you are. Carl Jung called this journey individuation, the process of becoming whole. It's not about inspirational magazine quotes or being a better version of yourself like the self-help world often advertises. It's a return home to become an integrated individual who doesn't ask for permission, doesn't people please, and doesn't conform to empty molds. What is individuation? It's not about your self-improvement by society's checklist, chasing passion for the sake of ego, achieving success through soulless formulas. Instead, it is knowing, facing, reconciling, coming home whole. It is a path you choose alone. There is no map, no pre-made curriculum, no course you can enroll in. You can't buy it. You can't be gifted it. You can't download it offline. You can only dive deep within yourself into the darkest corners, the deepest pain, and begin step by step to rebuild the most complete version of you. No one gives you meaning, you create it. Modern life teaches us there should be a syllabus for life. There will be a track to follow. Meaning will be handed to us once we meet society's standards. But Jung disagreed. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Individuation is the birth of meaning from your own shadows, wounds, and longings. You're not here to follow someone else's formula. You're here to write your own. A real story when success feels empty. I once met Daniel, a 45-year-old entrepreneur. He had financial stability, a respected reputation, a picture-perfect family. Yet he lived in quiet internal crisis. I followed all the rules, hit all the milestones, but I feel nothing. At that moment, Daniel had never asked himself, who am I outside these roles? What do I actually feel when no one's watching? Only when he began to dialogue with the wild buried parts of himself, the irrational emotions, the unspeakable dreams, the silenced self, did his individuation truly begin. Individuation is hard, but it's worth living for. You will face challenges. Loneliness, few will understand or join you. Disappointment, old values may crumble. A new beginning with parts of you still unexplored. But you will also discover your true worth, not because someone told you. A personal meaning that only you can feel. An inner freedom no one can buy, take, or fake. How do you begin the individuation journey? Stop outsourcing your sense of self. Don't ask, what do others think? Ask, what does my heart deeply desire? Accept the non-dual nature of your being. Balance logic with emotion. Embrace both strength and softness, kindness and selfishness, wildness and stillness. Track your dreams nightly. Your unconscious speaks through symbols. Write them down. Let them guide you. Find your personal symbol, a memory, an image, a sound that connects you to your inner truth. Let it become a compass for your soul's journey. Individuation is not a straight line. It is a map you draw yourself step by step, walking in the footprints of your own becoming. Call back the part of you that was silenced. If you're still reading this, pause. Ask yourself, what have I forgotten from long ago? What part of me has never been allowed to fully live? What childhood dream has been waiting quietly? Write it down. It's not just a sentence, it's an invitation to return. A quiet permission to become you fully finally. You've followed me through a journey into the deepest realms of your being, where light and shadow are no longer enemies, but two arms carrying you home to wholeness. You've explored the shadow, facing it instead of fleeing, listening instead of ignoring. The persona, peeling away the social mask to meet the face never fully seen. the tension between emotion and reason, and within that trembling, discovering silent strength. And you've realized meaning isn't something granted. It's something you choose. That's true freedom. Where are you standing now? Maybe you feel relief as if released from the chains of expectation, fear trembling in a landscape that's uncharted. Or maybe a whisper inside says, I know I can't go back. That very whisper marks the moment Carl Jung warned us about. What you resist not only persists but will grow in size. The parts you once tried to avoid will return with greater force, asking not for punishment but for presence. Not to make you someone new, but to guide you back to who you've always been before you were ever edited. Step into the fire of your becoming. You don't need certification. You don't need applause. You don't need a miracle. You need just one thing, the courage to step into the fire, not to be burned, but to shed. Jung reminded us there is no true rebirth without first passing through the chaos of darkness. Just as gold is refined through flame, your soul must be melted free from fear, programming and expectations to emerge radiant and alive. You are not broken. You are transforming. You are not lost. You are redrawing your inner map. You are not weak. You are shedding your old skin to grow larger. Ask yourself, what within me is longing to be lived? What part of me hasn't been heard since it was silenced long ago? And most of all, do I have the courage to choose myself right now, not someday when I'm ready? Let these questions guide you like stars lighting a dark sky, not to be answered, but to be lived. If there was a single phrase, an image, or a tremor in this video that touched something inside you, write it down, save it, or simply leave a comment that says, I am stepping into the fire of my becoming. Not for anyone else to read, but for you to witness your own soul. And if this journey helped you see a part of yourself you hadn't seen before, I invite you to click subscribe, not for the algorithm, but so you don't stray from the path you've just begun to walk. Before you go, remember this. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are not the product of someone else's expectations. You are an archetypal seed, a living possibility, a myth in motion, writing your own legend. And no matter where you are now, in a moment of collapse, in stunned silence, or in the first light of your inner dawn, the path of individuation continues. The unconscious stirs, the self awakens. You are not alone, but no one can walk this for you. If this final message touches you, let yourself step fully into the fire and tell me in the comments, what's the first thing you see in that new light? And if you'd like me to help turn this into deep, short-form videos, symbolic thumbnail prompts, or an AI-generated soundtrack, just say the word. Thank you for walking this path with me. Now go step into the only light that is truly yours yourself.